The General Motors ignition switch recall was a safety recall that affected millions of vehicles manufactured by the company. The recall was initiated in 2014 after it was discovered that a defect in the ignition switch of certain vehicles could cause the engine to shut off unexpectedly, disabling the airbags and power steering, making it difficult for drivers to control the vehicle. The disturbing fact is that the ignition switch defect was known by General Motors from 2013, which meant that the company knew of the defect for 11 years and took no action to remedy the problem. This delay in addressing the issue led to a number of serious accidents and deaths, which resulted in a number of ethical issues. First, GM had a cost culture over safety. This meant that profit was viewed as being more important than the safety of its customers. Second, after it was discovered that the ignition switch was faulty, the company delayed the recall for 11 years, which further exposed drivers to the potential risks associated with the defect. Also, the company was facing financial difficulties at the time and may have been reluctant to initiate a recall due to the costs. Inadequate compensation to victims. 91% of individuals who sought compensation from GM were denied, and 349 death claims were ruled ineligible. Lack of transparency. The company failed to disclose important information to regulators and the general public. The GM president had the ethical responsibility to prioritize the safety of GM customers over the company's profits and reputation. He also had the ethical responsibility to acknowledge the company's mistakes, take steps to rectify the issue, and to work to prevent similar issue from happening again. It was his responsibility to adhere to industry standards and best practices by ensuring that the company designed products that are safe for its customers. The president had the ethical responsibility to be transparent with the general public and government regulators about issues relating to the ignition switch. Some alternative decisions that the General Motors president could have made regarding the ignition switch recall are: 1. The affected vehicles should have been recalled as soon as he became aware of the issue rather than waiting several years later. Next, after identifying the issue with the ignition recall, with the ignition switch, the president could have made this decision for the company to install safer ignition switches in all affected vehicles rather than simply repairing the faulty ones. Also, the president could have implemented more rigorous quality control measures within the company for reporting safety issues. And finally, he could have informed the public of the risks associated with driving a vehicle with the switch defect. From a virtue ethics perspective, the right action is one that reflects positive character traits and values such as honesty, responsibility, and compassion. In the case of the ignition switch, GM could have acted with greater honesty and transparency by fully disclosing the issue with the ignition switch to the public and taking immediate actions to address the problem. The president could have demonstrated responsibility by taking accountability for the mistakes and committing to prevent similar issues from happening again, rather than placing the blame on the engineers. Finally, he could have shown greater compassion by providing greater compensation and support to victims and their families associated by the ignition switch defect. In conclusion, the best ethical decision will be to recall all affected vehicles immediately and offer financial compensation to all victims affected.